Good morning, everyone. My name is Renee White, Cloud Specialist for VMware. Thank you for joining us today for our live Cloud Economics webinar, TCO of Moving to the Cloud. In this webcast, we will dive into the economics of moving infrastructure to the cloud. We will walk you through the tools you can use to estimate the true cost of moving to VMware Cloud on AWS and how we can help with a data-driven TCO. Joining me today is Bill Roth, a veteran in the IT and finance industry, holding various executive roles at Sun, Morgan Stanley, and here at VMware. He leads our global cloud economics group. Thank you, Bill.
Thanks for that humbling introduction, Renee. Today, folks, I'm pleased to see so many folks from our customer and partner community joining us. Today, I want to talk to you about cloud economics and talk about what cloud economics means to us, but more importantly, for our partners, how you can use it to sell and make the case for VMware Cloud on AWS, and for our customers, how to think about total cost of ownership when thinking about cloud. So, what am I going to talk about today? Simply, first, I'll give you a recap about what VMC is, or VMware Cloud. Then I want to frame what cloud economics is, because it's a bit of an odd term, but I want to tell you how we think about it. Third, I want to talk about the information that we need to build a cloud TCO model. I'll give you a quick demo of how we do the process, and then I'll tell you how you can get one of your own, or as a partner, how we can engage with you so that you can deliver these to your customers. So let's get started. What is VMware Cloud on AWS? Well, look, VMware has been a leader, and for a long time, we realized very early on that if you'll remember 3, 4, 5 years ago, people thought everything was moving to the cloud. And our position was always, well, no, it's going to be a hybrid. And there will be stuff that's on-premise for a variety of reasons, but stuff will move to the cloud. So since then, we have been working on how do we build out the smartest hybrid cloud strategy where we focus on making it as easy as possible to maintain a hybrid environment. In a hybrid environment, however, there are problems, right? There are operational consistencies, especially if you have a cloud in a different kind of format. Many times it may require different tools. Think of all the new APIs that you have to learn on one of the hyperscaler programs. There's a whole new management infrastructure. The SLAs are inconsistent. There's incompatible formats. And with a hybrid cloud where the platforms are inconsistent, it decreases agility because you have to end up doing a lot of refactoring to move to the cloud. There's higher risks because projects take longer. There's a higher percentage of failure. Not only that, there is a shortage in cloud-related disciplines. And you'll see some of our research which points that out at the bottom of the slide. And there can be higher costs because of the delays and because of the cost of working. So what we've done is we've actually brought something to bear with VMware Cloud on AWS. It's a jointly engineered service where we take VMware Cloud Foundation and all the great stuff that you're running in your data center today, and we build a consistent environment in and on the AWS hardware. So their platform is consistent. The vSphere, vSAN, and NSX that you've come to know and love, as well as our old friend vCenter, all exist in VMware Cloud on AWS with direct access to all those great services you get from AWS, S3, Lambda, ELB, and so on. So it is a system that is delivered, operated, and supported by VMware. We have a number of capacity and consumption options, both on demand, but we also allow, if you're willing to commit for 1 year or 3 years, we offer you discounts there. And like as I said, it's vSphere, so full operational consistency. The hypervisor and the infrastructure that you've been using for years is the same as it exists on VMware Cloud and AWS. we are able to leverage AWS's global footprint. We're now in, I believe, up to 17 regions worldwide, and we give you direct access to all those great services. Let's see. So just some quick questions in the meantime. Jonathan says, are slides available for download? Absolutely. So Quinn Tomlin says, is the customer responsible for compute in AWS? And the answer is no, we bill you. The compute is done with VMware. So VMware, and so it's from VMware, you transact directly with VMware. So moving right along.
Hey, Bill, I have
Yeah.
some other questions here.
Oh, thanks, Renee.
Yeah, sure. So can I run Horizon VDI on this?
Absolutely. Horizon VDI works well. We'll have a webinar to discuss some of the complexities with sort of Microsoft licensing, but absolutely you can run Horizon VDI on VMC seamlessly. Any other questions?
Yes, I am not running anything in AWS today. Do I need to be?
So that's a great question, and I think the best thing to do is really think about your strategy. In your strategy, are you interested in sort of lower cost and flexibility? And can you handle any latency differences that you might have? But if you're a highly regulated environment, what are the sort of data residency issues? So you don't need to be, because if you're on-premise working for you, great. But if you want to have the benefit of VMware Cloud and AWS and the things that it offers, then yes. So for example, imagine how long it takes to get a new server. You call up your friends at Dell, you order a server, think of how long it takes to deliver, you then going to grab a screwdriver, put it into a rack. With VMware Cloud and AWS, if you need a new server, you can spin one up in 12 minutes. I've heard it's less than that, but 12 minutes is a conservative number. So I think it really depends on what priorities are driving you. Agility, cost savings, those two things can, I think, lead to kind of saying, yes, it's something you may want to consider. And we'll give you some contacts at the end of this where you can reach out. And if you're, whether through your partner or we'll connect you to one, we can help you kind of make that decision.
All right, thank you, Bill. One more question here. It looks like from the slide, the VMC Cloud is connected to native AWS. Do I have to pay for ingress or egress costs if I use S3 for storage?
It depends on regions. It depends on the regions you're in, but I do believe there are some egress costs, and those are not things that we control. That's sort of a function of that's kind of a function of kind of Amazon and Amazon's billing. So I believe there's slight egress charges, and those are things actually that, as we'll see, when we model out a VMware Cloud, when we model out a total cost of ownership, we actually can kind of estimate what those will be for you.
Okay, and one last question here. Do I have to have NSX on-premise first to be able to use VMware Cloud on AWS?
No, but it helps. But you generally don't. I mean, if you've got a workload, frankly, that you can put into an OVF or an OVA and vMotion it to some other cluster somewhere, then you can it will just work. So because it's really vSphere on both sides. So and that's sort of the benefit. When you move to VMware Cloud on AWS, you get the full stack, the full VMware Cloud Foundation stack, including vSAN and NSX. And that gives you some unique features, which we'll, I think, touch on in just a minute. So I think, any more questions, Renee?
Just one more on how about partners? Can they help us with this?
Oh, absolutely. We've got some partners who can sort of resell and set this up for you. If you're having trouble, I'll send out my email address at the end. If you can talk to either David Prinster or myself, and we'll be more than happy to help you and help you and your partner get started.
All right, thank you. That's all the questions for now.
You bet. So Conrad Harkrider asks, is the contract and security agreement with Amazon or VMware? Short answer is the agreement is with VMware. We do allow Amazon to resell this, but so talk to your customer, talk to your account rep, and they'll be able to talk you through it. All right, moving right along. So, as I've said, because VMware Cloud and AWS, we leverage the best of AWS and the best of vSphere to produce a pretty amazing service. And one of the principal values is seamless migration. Because it's vSphere on both sides, we get the benefit of being able to move from vSphere to vSphere, and it actually tends to be a huge monetary and time savings. It's consistent because it's vSphere on both sides. It gives you an unrivaled kind of portability, but there are also some interesting economic benefits, which we'll talk about in just a minute. And because it's vSphere, you'll be able to get, moving forward, all of the great features that are coming in vSphere, especially vSphere 7. All right, let's talk a little bit before we kind of dive in any deeper. Let's talk a little bit about this strange kind of notion. We've put two words together, cloud economics, but what does that mean? Well, in a minute and a half, I'll give you a tour of 300 years of economic history, just to sort of put this in context. I define economics as the study of human behavior, specifically around, most people think of it in terms of decisions, but the mostly it's about behavior. Now, if we think of classical economics, everyone thinks about Wealth of Nations, published by Adam Smith in the 1770s. There was a classical kind of notion of the typical economic person, Homo economicus, this economic man who made, and pardon the sexist language, I'm putting it in the terms of the 18th century, the that people made rational economic decisions based on data, and that the individual, for each choice, attempted to maximize the value of that choice. And more appropriately, humans update their opinions with new information. In the late 70s, a couple of Israeli psychologists actually ran a couple of studies that sort of undermined that. They asked the classic question of their classes, and they said, if you had a choice between a 50% chance of winning $4,000, or I give you $1,900 right now, which would you pick? Well, most people, because they would prefer a sure thing, would pick $1,900. Classical economic theory would say that a 50% chance at $4,000, which the choice value would be $2,000, is higher, and so that the Homo economicus would make that choice. So what it calls out is that human beings make these logical errors, or they have blind spots, or they have these biases, and that can lead to suboptimal decisions. And that the context that the decision happens in matters. Now, if you're interested in this kind of research, I strongly recommend The Undoing Project by Michael Lewis. Both an economic and a human story of how this whole field developed. But the key point relative to economics is people often make incorrect economic decisions, especially when dealing with the cloud. What we see generally is that there are 4 types of blind spots, or that are triggered from biases that people make when they make cloud decisions. In classical economic terms, oftentimes the switching cost, the cost of moving from one platform to another, is minimized or overlooked, whether that's through a success bias or generally too narrow a view of the problem. So the amount of time to refactor and rework, to move to for example, from one type of cloud to another with different APIs, a different VM format, is often underestimated, and therefore people tend to look at things incorrectly and make incorrect decisions. Second, because platforms often require new thinking, new technologies, there's often that people often underestimate how they can get access to talent or how they can skill people up. Third, there's decisions often get made because people undervalue the risk of what happens if I move to a platform and what will it take for me to unwind that and give me other options. If I move to a platform, does it increase my options? Does it decrease my options? So there's often a blind spot there. And finally, and I'm glad we had the question about egress costs, operational costs can change. So on the one hand, as was pointed out earlier, there can be, I think you've got to pay particular attention to egress costs and kind of understand your network flows. On the other hand, also understand that on something like VMware Cloud on AWS, unlike vSphere on-prem, we do the updates and upgrades for you, and that can save up to 50% of the kind of administrative overhead of administering a virtualized environment. So those are important. Those are some important blind spots that folks need to pay attention to. An anonymous attendee asks, are customers most commonly using storage in AWS as well, or are customers using on-prem storage and stretching compute to VMC and AWS? I would say my team's probably gone through about 600 deals, and I've probably been involved around 100 different kind of environments myself. And a lot of times they're using storage. We'll talk about our node structure, the nodes that you can buy on VMware Cloud on AWS, and mostly they're using the direct attached storage there that's associated with the nodes and taking advantage of vSAN. There are a number of really interesting solutions for using both on-prem and cloud-related storage, but also people are getting really, I think, inventive. And as they look at their DR and backup situations, how do they use something like Glacier or S3? So to the anonymous attendee, I'd say probably 80% are using the storage that exists on the nodes. Some are using EBS, but then some, when they look at backup and disaster recovery kind of scenarios, actually look at some of the other sort of S3 Glacier level storage. So let's see, answer and done. So great question. Thank you, anonymous attendee. So again, where is our economic value? When a marketing person says consistent infrastructure, what that means is we give you the same platform so that the migration is about as easy as can be. When we say consistent operations to minimize talent, we say you don't have to learn much more because it's the same platform. When we say workload portability from zero lock-in, you can move to the cloud easily, and if the cloud doesn't work for you, you can move back. And that's you can do that easily, unlike with some of the other public clouds. And of course, we have the scale-out architecture and being available in 17 different regions. So that's the marketing talk. Where do we save you money in reality? Well, first of all, it has to do with the standard virtualization. Unlike some of the other public clouds, you get a benefit from the notion of things like oversubscription, where you can, when you buy by the host, you can take advantage of oversubscription of memory. And for example, dedupe in using vSAN, using storage. You can also, we make it easy for you to do high availability. We've got some interesting stretch cluster options, which make providing high availability as well as fault tolerance easy. You save a lot also because we're doing the updates and upgrades for you. So for those of you that are on VMware today, imagine what it would take if you didn't have to worry about patching and updates and upgrades. How much would you save? And in many cases, we've seen labor savings up to 50%. Finally, there's also efficiency, because in many ways, because you're in a more effective environment, and AWS's data centers often run allegedly at below a 1.2 power unit efficiency, for those of you data center nerds, there actually is sort of a power savings, as well as the fact, because of virtualization over subscription and improving density, you actually need less physical hardware. As part of our cloud economics environment, one of the things we can do is actually model out your carbon savings if that's important to you and your business. So let's talk about the whole buildup here. Was we have the ability to do a cloud economic model, and for you to demonstrate to you the math of how a total cost of ownership works out. And so, but we need some information generally about the environment. Let's talk about kind of what's needed. So generally, when you or your partner say, hey, can you help us with the total cost of ownership environment, the first thing we do is we ask you for an inventory of your environment, whether that's through our vTools or a vRealize Operations inventory and performance report, or in a vCenter inventory. We get the payload of your virtual infrastructure. So you can all try out vmcsizer.vmware.com, and I recommend you set, and we'll show you how to use it in just a minute. But that'll put in and will tell you how many nodes you need to buy on VMware Cloud. But we're also going to ask some additional information so that we can customize it just for you. Because the sizer just tells you the size, it does not tell you the price. So where do you want to put this? Are you in Frankfurt? Are you in Sao Paulo? Or would you be happy with putting it either in Ohio or Oregon? We'll want to know the currency, because this is a total cost of ownership. We want to know what currency you want to transact in, understand what your on-premise situation is, and then get a list of those environments, but also understand Microsoft Windows Server and SQL Server VMs so that we can understand the cost there as well. What we'll then do is sort of help you understand the various sort of cloud costs and do the comparison, but we'll also understand, if you're going to migrate, how many people will you have to do that? Because one of the things that on a move to a more to a public cloud provider is that when you do that transition, it can actually take a lot longer. A recent report by our friends at ESG said it can take up to 27 wall clock days to refactor a virtual machine from on-prem into a public cloud. And so if that's what it's going to take, and you can see that as you get more and more VMs, that can take a lot. And I'm happy to provide that data to anybody. I'll give you my contact at the end. But so we also take a look at your labor, and then we also establish risk. We then basically have a bunch of assumptions baked in, including rack cost, power cost, bandwidth, labor, discounts. And then what we take a look at is what is on-prem versus VMware Cloud on AWS. And we then provide you with the output. So for partners, this is something that we would work with you to gather. And then we would work with you to position the cloud economics analysis so that we can then help you take it to the customer. So we provide output in a PDF and a PowerPoint deck that you can then deliver to your customer. So that's the process. We collect some data, we size things up, we then work with the partner and the account executive to make sure that we fully understand the customer's environment, and then we deliver it to the customer.
Bill, I have a few questions here.
Sure.
Okay. First one is, how do I make sure the data is correct for my environment?
Great question. There's a number of really great tools that you can use. Look up RV Tools. I think it's Robware rvtools.robware.net or something like that is a great simple tool for doing it. But what we do is we pull inventories from either your vCenter or if you've got a TAM service that you offer or that you have from VMware, we can ask the TAM. But basically, we get your inventory and we make sure that it's correct. We then have a discussion with you about how much headroom do you prefer, what kind of efficiencies do you prefer, and so we work with you, the customer, to help kind of make sure that we get close to the truth.
All right, thank you. Next question. How much are customers typically saving?
What a great question. One of my favorites. So we did an analysis of the models, of the over 300 models we did in 2019, and it came out to anywhere between 15 and 30% when we do the very first model. Now, that doesn't factor in discounts. It doesn't factor in a number of other things. And the reason that people get these savings is largely because we're right-sizing as we move them, because in many cases, we're seeing that many on-prem environments are way over-provisioned. You don't need to over-provision in the cloud because it takes 12 minutes to spin up a new host. The hosts are there, and we have capacity in all regions, so there's no need to pay for extra hardware until you need it. And so that's generally one of the areas where the sizing comes from, as well as some of the labor savings down the road. What other questions, Renee?
Let's see. I'd like to look at this for 1, 3, and 5 years. Is that an option for me?
What a great question. Why, yes, it is. Generally, we provide the model into payroll, basically into kind of a P&L model. So we'll show you sort of cash expenditures. And we do support both on-demand, 1 year, 3 year, and we can actually model out 5 year. But we would have to have a little bit of a discussion with your account representative to understand how to handle kind of the out years. Our current business model really focuses on 3 year, but we're happy to have the 5 year discussion as well. And we have modeled out several 5 year models.
All right, and last question. My CFO wants to see a TCO for any major IT purchase. Will this work for my DR environment, or does it have to be for my prod?
So we can do DR and your production environment. Our model does take care of disaster recovery. I think with disaster recovery, though, what really warrants is engaging a VMware sales engineer or solution architect, because I think there's some really unique ways to break down what we mean by DR. And if you have certain kinds of savings or you have a certain recovery time objective, I think there are ways to use the cloud to actually get a little bit smarter about DR. So I see a bunch of questions, Renee, that are coming in. I guess I'll just hit the, I'll start maybe go through some of the questions here. Could you further articulate the bridge between cost savings and risk analysis? Is there an extra step between them? Not really. Our model does, we ask you a couple of questions relative to your risk sensitivity, and we can help model that out. One of our star economists, Craig Stanley, has come up with essentially this analysis. He's a former Gartner analyst who's come up with this a really sophisticated way of kind of modeling risk. And so I think he is, so we can help you with that, and that does come standard with our models. Let's see, what is the slide in the diagram, the output, the lower left? It looks like a probability forecast. So I think that is actually a model which we can show when we do a model for you, basically what the cost of VMware Cloud on AWS is, but also if you were moving to a non-VMC cloud, here's the issue. It's going to take a lot longer to migrate from on-prem to a non-VMware cloud. And so you've got to maintain 2 separate environments as they move along, and that chart illustrates that, which is that because it may take in some cases, a year, 2 years, 3 years longer, you've got to maintain two infrastructures. And so we're modeling out the cost, the kind of hidden cost, or one of the costs of sort of carrying those two environments. John Kelly asks, can Live Optics be used? Thank you, John Kelly. Live Optics is one of my favorite tools. Please use Live Optics. It's actually a great tool. Live Optics is great, and you can also use that. In fact, in many cases, it's kind of the gold standard for these sorts of things. So when we talked about RV tools and some of the other things you can do, John Kelly rightly points out that you can also use Live Optics. What kind of capacity guarantees you can make? I think those are sort of related to sort of SLAs, and I'd send you over to our terms of service. The capacity, you can go to cloud.vmware.com, pull the menu down and look at VMC on AWS, and you can see some of the reliability guarantees, but also the structure of the nodes, and that may answer your question. Where do we find that risk analysis document? Well, at the very end, I will show you a slide on how you can ask for a cloud economics analysis. And so what I would do is, I'll ruin the plot here. Talk to your partner business manager or your partner and ask them tell them you want to get a cloud economic analysis from VMware, and we will help you, and the analysis will be part of that. Okay, Ronald Penahua says the storage on-premise and in the cloud have to be vSAN. That is, I mean, in case that is the situation when you're moving to VMware Cloud on AWS. All right, so now you've seen a model. Let's take a look at what it takes to build a model. And let's pull up our sample model here to give you an idea of the kinds of things that we offer. Here's our basic model. Now, one of the things that I've mentioned is that we always start out by going to vmcsizer.vmware.com. Now, let's just say we have a standard workload that includes 1,000 VMs. So we'll put in 1,000 VMs, and let's just assume there's 200 on average, 200 gigs of storage per VM. We're going to use a dedupe of 1.5, the target RAM ratio, our memory overcommit of 1.25. And in general, we'll use a CPU utilization of about 30%, which frankly is fleet-wide average. And we'll hit recommendation. It recommends 28 nodes. So that's taking all of those 1,000 VMs. How many nodes do you have to put in the cloud to buy in the cloud to do that? Is 28. Now, what interesting, it shows you here that that it's storage bound. What we do is we size to the smallest number of nodes for the largest resource category. In this case, storage is driving the node count. So in that case, if you have a database or you have a file system that, or some sort of storage environment that you can pare down before you move to the cloud, that's one way in which you can shrink the number of nodes. So again, we take this number from VMC sizer.vmware.com. What we do then is we take that number, we take our 1,000 VMs, and I'm going to size this out for US dollars. We do support all 6 VMware currencies. We do support all 17 regions, so we can put this anywhere you want. We put in our 1,000 VMs, the 28 hosts we got from the sizer, and let's assume, because generally the environment is over provisioned, that we assume that you've got 30 hosts. They're 2 processor units, 12 cores per processor. We're going to also assume, because there are some additional Microsoft licensing charges, that 200 of those VMs have Windows Server Data Center, just to include that. So when we do that, we then end up with a model which shows that on average, the VMware Cloud on AWS is about 14% less expensive. And you may say, well, how did you get there? Well, generally what we do is we will walk you and the customer through, you, the partner, and the customer through the process. And because we generally work this out with a spreadsheet, you can take a look at the formulas. So when we say, for example, server costs in year one are 664,000, where'd you get that? Well, we see it's G52 and G55. We see that my physical cost at G52 is 30 hosts, and then we take a street price of 19,000 plus some hardware maintenance for year one, and that's how we get the price. As you can see, our model also includes rack infrastructure, so cost of a rack, PDUs, top of rack switch. We also include, just to do an apples to apples comparison, what the vSphere would cost, as well as Microsoft cost, storage, networking, and labor. And we walk you through all this. We then do a direct compare. We know we need 28 nodes in VMC, and that's easy. You can get that from our online pricing tool so that you can understand sort of what the cost is. So in that, the people tend to ask, well, okay, what kind of assumptions were behind that? Well, then we walk you through it. We walk you through the assumptions. So for example, your on-prem storage, you may get a great deal from our friends at Dell EMC on SAN pricing. We'll adjust to your cost per gigabyte. Your admins may be way more efficient. You may have one admin that can handle 160 hosts. So we'll adjust your labor rates. You may get deeper discounts on vSphere. We will customize the model so that it accurately models out your environment, the environment of your customers. Now, people asked some questions about sort of the risk modeling. How do we do that? Well, what we want to do is measure the risk of what's the added risk you take when you move to a generic public cloud. So we know we have 1,000 VMs. In order to work that out, you've got 4 people who will be translating those VMs from your on-premise environment to this new public cloud, not VMC, but public cloud. We also factor in how much you need to train. We then actually look at how important and various sort of risk items, right? How do you think you're going to rehost again? How concerned are you about being locked into public infrastructure? What about edge and IoT? And so we ask you about these, okay? And as a result of that, we build a model. I've showed you that we're sort of less expensive in monetary terms, but for these 1,000 VMs, if you started today, you could literally be done by the end of May if you move to VMC on AWS. Why? Because of vMotion, the power of a consistent platform. But if you have to take those 1,000 VMs and translate them for another machine format and deal with the different infrastructure requirements and training, it would take you 29 months based on our model. And in this case, we would sort of walk you through it. If that number seems high, we can walk you through our various levels of assumption. So as you can see, in general, the 3-year operating costs can be radically lower, both in terms of not time, but also sort of time to completion as well. The model can also show, for example, if you're a bigger organization and you want it to be done in 12 months, it'll literally tell you how many more people you need to hire. So those are the kinds of things that we can provide with this model. And then we provide you with both the PowerPoint and the in a PDF as a direct result. And what I'll do is David Prinster will be sending out the recording afterwards. I'll make sure that a sample report is included with that. All right,
Bill, I believe you answered this question.
Yeah.
Somebody asked if they can have that Excel spreadsheet that you just showed.
In general, the spreadsheet, I can give you kind of the output. It is a joint model that we worked with our friends on Amazon. And so the current IP rights restrictions on that don't allow us to share the spreadsheet, but we can definitely share the output.
Okay, and I have one more question here. Thank you, this is great. Who can I reach out to for help?
What a great question. Thank you very much. So Look, how do you want one of these? If you want one of these, contact your partner or your partner business manager. And so for partners out there, you can either contact me, broth@vmware.com, or my esteemed colleague, David Prinster, prinsterd@vmware.com. We will set you up and allocate definitely allocate an economist for you. And our process is we collect the data, we confirm with the account team, and then we schedule it with the customer. So we've got a brand new online tool where you can take a look at your own TCO savings. You can go to vmctco.vmware.com. Brand new link, just brand new URL, just published. But if you want the full analysis complete with Microsoft implications, you can basically contact David or myself or your partner business manager, and we'll do what we can to get you that analysis. So as you know, partners, there's a ton more opportunities for in-depth training. Definitely take a look at the VM Lives, chock full of useful information, and we'll make sure you get these slides. You can also register for the various VM Lives where we give information to our partners. Or, of course, if you want immediate response, definitely contact the affable David Prinster. So I guess that's all I have. Any, this is, thank you very much for the time. I think we're over a little bit, but, if there are any other questions, I'm more than happy to answer.